Commissioner, and obviously your MC this afternoon. And it's wonderful to have so many of you here today at these wonderful facilities lent to us by PwC. We have what promises to be a fascinating hour coming up. But as we get underway, please note that we're recording our proceedings today. Indeed, we're live streaming our event via the Human Rights Commission website. So a very warm welcome to all those watching via www.humanrights.gov.au, your portal to all things human rights in Australia. Well, today we will be launching a new tool designed to help Australian organisations make the most of cultural diversity. And to help us with our launch today, we have a number of special guests, including a special expert panel who will take us through some of the issues around diversity and the workplace. I'll introduce our guests very shortly, but before I do, I'd like to call on Aunty Donna Ingram to give us an official welcome to country. Aunty Donna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here today to offer you welcome to country for the launch of the Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool. It gives me pride to represent my community and the Gadigal in this important cultural protocol. It shows respect for and recognition to the unique position of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australian culture and history. The land we are meeting on today is the traditional land of the Gadigal, who are one of 29 clans of the Eora Nation, which is bordered by the Hawkesbury, the Georges and the Nepean rivers. I'm an Aboriginal woman who proudly identifies with the Wiradjuri Nation through my family connections from a town called Cowra in central west New South Wales. I was born on Gadigal land and I've had the privilege to live, work and raise my 4 children on this land for most of my life. I acknowledge the Gadigal, their spirits and ancestors who will always remain with the land, Mother Earth. I thank them for their ongoing custodianship and for allowing us to gather here today for the launch of this important online tool. I'm also very proud to be part of the oldest living culture in the world, the Aboriginal culture of Australia, with our unique and distinct heritage, cultures and identities. I pay my respects to our elders, both past and present, and realise the sacrifices made by our leaders to create a better future for Aboriginal people. I do this as a reminder and as a tribute to elders and those who have gone before us to fight for land rights, justice and equity for our communities. I extend my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from all clans and nations who are present this afternoon. I also recognise our non-Aboriginal sisters and brothers who walk beside us to combat racism and discrimination in all its forms to create a more inclusive Australia. I now offer you a warm and sincere welcome to the land of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation and wish you a safe stay on the land and safe travel from the land. On behalf of the Gadigal and my community, I'd like to congratulate the Australian Human Rights Commission, Diversity Council Australia and Vic Health on their initiative on the development of this Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool as part of the National Anti-Racism Strategy. In closing, it should be remembered that this is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, Aunty Donna. We really appreciate you making the time to welcome us today. And I would also like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and join in paying my respects to elders past and present. Can I also acknowledge Senator Conchetto Fierravanti-Wells, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Social Services, with special responsibility for multicultural affairs and settlement services. Long title. Mr. Luke Sayers, CEO of PwC Australia, Mr. Marcus Laithwaite, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, PwC Australia, Professor Gillian Triggs, my colleague and President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Mr. Hakan Harman, CEO of Multicultural Australia, members of the National Anti-Racism Partnership, including Mr. Joe Caputo, Chair of Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils of Australia, our special panel members, Mr. Ken Wu, partner of PwC, Ms. Lisa Anese, CEO of Diversity Council Australia, Mr. Adam Crichton, economics correspondent at The Australian, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. There is no greater truism today than to say that Australia is a multicultural society. We know this. Almost half of our population is either born overseas or has a parent who was born overseas. About 1 in 5 of us speak a language other than English at home. And yet, while Australians embrace diversity in our everyday lives, while we are, you might say, relaxed and comfortable about our cultural diversity, there remains a long way to go in getting things right in the workplace. Not every employer or manager understands how they can benefit from a culturally diverse workforce, and not everyone knows how they can make the most of culturally diverse clients or customers. The Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool is designed to make these jobs easier. One of the problems with discrimination in the workplace is that not everyone realises it may be happening. "I know it when I see it" is a common response to racial discrimination. Indeed, most of us will have a very innate sense of where the line is drawn. But on matters of culture, there will be occasions when people may inadvertently discriminate, or when discrimination may be subtle in character. When it comes to discrimination, the issue is as much about impact as it is about intention. Well, this tool that we're launching today will help highlight situations where discrimination could occur, and it points to steps that employers and managers can take to prevent them from happening. The Australian Human Rights Commission has as one of its major priorities that of human rights and business, and we've developed this tool as part of the National Anti-Racism Strategy. As many of you would know, this strategy has been in place since 2012 and was developed by the National Anti-Racism Partnership. The partnership comprises a number of federal government departments and civil society organisations. But the workplace is one of the priority areas of the strategy. And this tool is very much integral to the national agenda of preventing racial discrimination and promoting cultural diversity. The Commission has been very grateful to have as its partners Diversity Council Australia and VicHealth. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank these two organisations for their support in developing this tool. And during the past year, we have, with their help, been refining this tool and been testing it with a range of corporate and not-for-profit organisations across the country. And a special note of acknowledgement to VicHealth, as this tool is based on work that VicHealth commissioned a number of years ago, which they piloted in 2 Victorian local councils in the cities of Whittlesea and Greater Shepparton. I acknowledge in particular the efforts of Yin Paradis, Bridget Trenery, who may be here today. Hi, Bridget. And Peter Strecker in developing that original piece of work. Well, let me tell you now very quickly how the tool works. You may be wondering what this tool is all about. To understand how it works, you really need to see it. So what we have at the moment is on screen the homepage of the Cultural Diversity Tool, where you to go to culturaldiversity.humanrights.gov.au. You will also have with you some sheets which illustrate what the website will look like. But if you go to the website and take a moment to create a login, you'll be on the way to completing an online assessment of how well your organisation fares on cultural diversity. The assessment itself consists of 3 items across the areas of leadership, strategy, staff, culture, and monitoring. Each item will list a best practice standard, and we also have 3 options. And these options will help the user understand what's indicative of an organisation that's either just starting out, that is currently developing their policies, or that already has an advanced system for dealing with culture in the workplace. So you can think of all this as something of a questionnaire for how you can identify exactly the cultural sophistication of your organisation. For example, does your organisation have strategies to support cultural diversity that are part of your planning processes? Do you have shortlisting or interview procedures that are designed to reduce potential bias against candidates from culturally diverse backgrounds? Do you have strategies to retain and promote culturally diverse talent through things like mentoring or peer coaching? And do you monitor your progress on issues of cultural diversity? As you answer such questions, you will have as your guide various case studies that we've compiled from the private sector and not-for-profit sector that demonstrate exactly what best practice can involve. Now, once you complete the assessment, you'll receive an automatically generated confidential report that will show you your organisation's results. Think of it as something of a health check for your organisation. And the tool will then invite you to add comments against your results and to nominate ways to move your organisation to the next level of good cultural practice. Use of this tool, I should note, is free. There's no cost involved in accessing the tool and no cost involved in the confidential report that will be generated for your organisation. And depending on the size of your organisation, the tool can be expected to take you to complete in about an hour or so. So that's some of the thinking behind the Cultural Diversity tool, and also a brief summary of how the tool works. But don't take my description of it. To really get a sense of how it does work, you really need to try it. So I do encourage you to log into it and have a go. And I want to reiterate as well that this tool represents just the start of the conversation about diversity and not the end of it. There's still a lot that we can learn about diversity and a lot that we can do to get the most out of it. To help us get our conversation going today, I'd now like to introduce Mr. Luke Sayers. Luke Sayers is the CEO of PwC Australia and Vice Chairman of PwC Asia. Luke joined the firm in 1991 and has been a global relationship partner for some of the firm's most important clients. He's been a member of the Australian leadership team since 2004 and has been tax and legal business leader and also markets leader at PwC. He commenced as National Managing Partner in 2010 and commenced as CEO in April 2012. But please, Luke.
Welcome, welcome everybody. I think we should give Tim another round of applause. Tremendous work, Tim. I will be brief this afternoon, but I did want to officially welcome you here, and I think the work that has been done by Tim and the DCA and a large number of people in getting this tool to today is just outstanding. And I guess the reason why I think it's outstanding is that we have sort of the good fortune at PwC of getting to engage far and wide with clients and in our communities. And diversity, as I see it, over sort of the last 5 to 6 years, has a bit come in and out of fashion. I think the gender part of diversity has some real traction and there's some really good momentum. But to be honest, as I go and talk to CEOs in Australia and also abroad, this notion of diversity and difference in a holistic sense is one that we as business people are still truly getting our heads and hearts around. And it's very complex. It's very complex because diversity is yes gender, yes cultural, yes disability, yes different ways of thinking. Diversity in its most holistic sense is very broad and very far-reaching. And I find that most organisations look at it in a very piecemeal fashion. It's either this or it's this or it's this. It's not a holistic approach to diversity. And why I think this tool in particular is tremendous is that, again, a lot of the debate and the discussion has been about targets and quotas. And that's one part of the puzzle, which I think is an important part. But more and more leaders are looking for not sort of the what or the light on the hill, but how. How do we move from a culture and an unconscious bias today to that in the future? The how. And this tool starts to look at best practice across 30 ingredients or areas and score you, and it starts to help open up the perspectives around the how associated with change. When I look at PwC, we've got 6,000 or so wonderful people, have the great fortune of engaging with most business organisations in Australia and afar, and we think there's a tremendous opportunity for us as a firm to really play a commercial business and societal role in being at the forefront of diversity. This is paramount to our strategy. It is front and centre to the strategic imperatives of the firm. It's not put to the side within the human capital group. It is front and centre on the dance floor for our strategy. Why is that so? Because we believe that there is tremendous advantage for our clients, our markets, society, and our people in truly mastering and pushing ourselves to change associated with diversity. In simple language, it's not kind of a nice to have to the side. We see there being tremendous competitive advantage from a business perspective and also from a societal perspective in being world-class in diversity. Today is about one part of diversity, but I think Tim and the team have done an outstanding job over the last 6 to 12 months in particular in bringing this to the business community and bringing this to society at large and starting a conversation. You do not change beliefs and belief patterns and neural pathways unless you start talking about it. Talking about it is oftentimes very hard because for a whole slew of reasons we often look at this as a risk or a negative inhibitor. I believe strongly that this is an opportunity. We need to encourage our people and the communities to talk about diversity, to make diversity a topic that we can fumble through, and it's all right to fumble through, but unless we fumble through it and self-regulate and correct, we don't actually advance the ball. But we have to find a way to give confidence to talk about the challenges and the problems and change people's beliefs and biases to be honest, a more contemporaneous new world way of thinking. So I think we've got an all-star panel this afternoon. It's the start of a conversation. This tool we absolutely get behind and we'll be using at PwC and looking to get every piece of value out of the how as we move ourselves to having 5% of our partners being Asian cultural background by 2016. So please join the conversation. Thanks for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Well, thank you so much, Luke, for getting that conversation going, and I want to acknowledge your firm's leadership on matters of cultural diversity. You really summed up the three real challenges of thinking about diversity today. It is about winning the hearts and the minds. It is about being holistic rather than wholemeal, peaceful rather. And it's not about white bread. It's all about wholemeal today, folks. And as you say, it is about both the economic and social dimensions of talking about diversity. Well, now it's time for the official launch of the Cultural Diversity Tool, and we're delighted to have Senator Fierranti-Wells to do the honours today. Senator Fierranti-Wells has been Senator for New South Wales since 2005 and has been Parliamentary Secretary since 2013. She served in various shadow portfolios, including as Shadow Minister for Mental Health and Shadow Minister for Ageing. Prior to entering Parliament, the Senator was primarily a lawyer with the Australian Government Solicitor. She is the proud daughter of Italian migrants, and in recognition of her service to the Australian-Italian community, was made a Knight of the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic. The Senator has been, for many decades, a prominent advocate for cultural diversity, and we're very fortunate to have her as an influential champion of multiculturalism today. But please welcome Senator Concetta Fierranti-Wells.
Well, thank you very much, Tim Soutphommasane, Professor Gillian Triggs. Can I start, Auntie Donna, also by adding my acknowledgement of the traditional owners. Luke Sayers, Kim Wu, Lisa Anise, Adam Crichton, many distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my very great pleasure to be here this evening to launch the Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool. As Parliamentary Secretary for Multicultural Affairs and Settlement Services, I recognise the varied ideas and perspectives a diverse workforce can bring to any business. Workforce diversity is a national asset. It results in greater innovation. It encourages creative problem solving. It helps create an organisation with great potential. Workplace diversity is not about finding differences, it is about giving everyone the opportunity to contribute. Today, 1 in 4 of our 23 million people were born outside Australia, and 45% of Australians, and that's almost half of us, were born overseas or have at least one parent who was born overseas. Since 1945, 7.5 million people have arrived here, including 800,000 humanitarian entrants. We speak about 300 different languages, including Indigenous languages. Indeed, 1 in 5 of us speak a language other than English at home. We are not only one of the most culturally diverse nations on earth, we are also one of the most socially cohesive. So it is fitting that we should be leading the world in workplace diversity. We have seen how our post-war immigration program has benefited our lives in so many ways. These changes have enhanced our economic, social and cultural fabric and have enriched us as a nation. The success of our uniquely Australian multiculturalism arises very much from the commitment to the common elements that unite us, combined with a respect and understanding of our social, cultural and religious differences. Through the years, we have succeeded in implementing decades of growth, change and the redefinition of ourselves as a modern nation. And an important contribution to this social cohesion have been our workplaces. As the daughter of migrants myself, and having been involved in the multicultural space for about 30 years, I have seen firsthand and fully recognise the potential offered and realised every day through our multicultural society. In particular, I recognise the varied ideas and the different perspectives that a diverse workforce can bring to any business. Diversity can result in greater innovation, encourage creative problem solving and help a business to reach its full potential. In short, diversity adds value. And with our increasing diversity, it is also important that we maximise the benefits to Australia to enable us to recruit talented people and enable businesses, whether small, medium or large, to attract a broader range of clients and customers. This will all contribute to enhancing Australia's productive diversity. This can be a significant asset to Australian business and our economy when you consider that we share around 300 different ancestries and, as I said, speak as many languages. Through an increasingly globalised economy, this offers Australian business an unprecedented connection to overseas markets and opportunities. This tool will help us make the most of these opportunities. The tool is based on international best practice. It draws on the experience of Australian businesses and has been refined through pilot testing with local councils, not-for-profit organisations and corporates around the country. It will help build on an already strong record of Australian business using diversity to innovate and expand. We also should stop and think about the amount of time we spend at work and think about the workplace as a forum for exposure to cultural diversity. The workplace is a microcosm of our nation, people from different backgrounds working together for a common good. This will further assist in developing understanding between cultures, something that we need now more than ever. The government's investment in the tool is a clear demonstration of our commitment to helping Australian business, as well as our strong commitment to Australian multiculturalism and the principles of access and equity. The Australian government provided $1.7 million to the Australian Human Rights Commission to develop and implement the National Anti-Racism Strategy, and the Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool is one of the products of this strategy. It will add to other successful strategies such as Harmony Day, which, as we have seen from the record number of events this year, has become an important celebration in thousands of workplaces around Australia. I congratulate all involved on your work to develop the Workplace Cultural Diversity Tool, particularly the Australian Human Rights Commission, Diversity Council Australia, and the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation. You can be very proud of what you have done and the difference it will make to the lives of many Australians. For some, it will mean feeling more included at work. For business, it will be the opening of new opportunities, and for customers, it will be a case of buying from businesses that understand and cater to their needs and wants. I'm sure that this free tool will assist many employers to maximise the benefits of cultural diversity for their workplace and effectively manage a culturally diverse workforce. I thank you for your efforts and your commitment and for developing a tool that will help our nation move into the future in a better and smarter way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator, for launching the Cultural Diversity Tool. We really couldn't think of a better and more appropriate advocate of cultural diversity to do the honours today. And can I also offer a welcome to my colleague, Tim Lawson, Human Rights Commissioner, for joining us just in time for our panel discussion. It really is a statement of the Human Rights Commission's commitment to business and human rights that we have such prominent support from my colleagues here today. As I introduce the panel, I'd like to get the panelists themselves just to come up to the stage, and I'll offer an intro. But they're going to take us through some of the issues around cultural diversity in the workplace, and what we'll have is a panel discussion for the next 15 minutes or so, and then I'll open it up to the floors to the floor for questions from you for the next 15 minutes. But we have over to your right, Ken Wu. Ken Wu is a financial services partner from PwC and is the firm's national asset management industry leader. Ken's a corporate tax partner and he's actively involved in policy and industry developments. He's also the cultural diversity leader for PwC and has been involved in some of the recent public debate about whether a bamboo ceiling exists in Australia. In the middle on stage we have Ms. Lisa Anese. Lisa is the Chief Executive Officer of Diversity Council Australia and has been so since June this year. Prior to this, she was the Programs and Member Services Director for DCA. Lisa first joined DCA in 2009, and among other things, she's played a key role in developing the organisation's relationship with the UN Global Alliance and UN Global Compact. She's the co-author of Chief Executives Unplugged, CEOs Get Real About Women in the Workplace, which was named as a must-read business book by AFR Boss magazine in 2005. And to your left, you have Mr. Adam Crichton, who's the economics correspondent for the Australian newspaper. You may recognise his face from the newspaper that you might from day to day. He was a senior advisor to then opposition leader Tony Abbott, and prior to joining the Australian was a research fellow at the Centre for Independent Studies, which is a think tank. Adam is also a graduate of the University of New South Wales and Balliol College, Oxford. Now, over to the panel, and I might begin with you, Lisa. How do you think Australian employers and managers should think about this cultural diversity tool? And in very practical terms, who exactly in an organisation is most likely to use this tool?
Thanks, Tim, and congratulations on the launch today. At Diversity Council Australia, we support organisations to build their capability in diversity. So I think that this tool is a great opportunity for organisations to start the very basic assessment and analysis of their workplace. It's quite surprising how little we know about the people we work with sometimes, and it's really important to understand that in order to manage diversity really well, you first need to understand what it is that you're managing. And it's not a simple question of just looking at some demographics and rating people according to an ABS system, which is very broad. But this really goes through the different ways that people self-identify and the different capabilities that individuals need to manage cultural diversity properly. So I think if your organisation is really serious about being active in the cultural diversity space, it will take some time to look at this tool and do it. Just do it in your workplace.
If I can turn to you now, Ken, one of the measures of diversity concerns leadership. And it's been observed by many that the composition of leadership in corporate Australia, whether it's senior executives or board directors, that composition may not necessarily reflect the diversity that we have in Australian society at large. In your opinion, do you think there's a problem here with getting more diverse leaders in Australian workplaces? And very quickly, if we do, what are some of the reasons why?
So I think that there is evidence that shows that there is a lack of representation from a cultural diversity perspective in the leadership positions in business and also in the broader community. So the question then is exactly what you're saying, Tim. What are the things that can get in the way? And I have looked at this from my own personal experience, and some of it is related to the environmental or cultural behaviours that you can learn while you're at home at the dinner table as you're growing up. And some of these behaviours actually don't manifest themselves into useful strategies or tactics in the workplace. And so it's an understanding of how those may manifest themselves. So for example, if you are from a background where it's very important to be respectful, that can be seen as a lack of ability to challenge, which may then affect your ability to lead. If you are from a background where you are encouraged to work 10% harder than the person next to you, do you spend that 10% working on the extra detail in the appendix in the report, or do you spend that 10% working on managing your stakeholders and building relationships? So there's a variety of reasons that you can explore around how that arises from that perspective. And then on the other side of it is the organisational perspective around unconscious bias.
So you touched there, Ken, on environmental cultural behaviours. If I can, just on that point, bring you in. If we talk about the workplace setting, if you're talking about environmental or cultural behaviours, you're really talking about workplace culture. And one of the premises of this tool is that having a more inclusive or welcoming workplace culture can have a direct effect on productivity. So, Adam, I'm wondering, as an economist and as someone who writes about economics on a daily basis, so is there a sound case, you think, for linking those two things, workplace culture and productivity?
I think there is, but before I answer, is this on? I don't think it is on. I don't have to.
I'll help. This is a world first. Me helping with the technical thing. There we go.
Is that working?
No. Yeah, 5 seconds on now.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I think the economics literature on the benefits of cultural diversity is actually somewhat ambivalent. I don't mean to be a party pooper, but there are two factors at play. And on the one hand, we've heard all the benefits of cultural diversity, and they are all theoretically and empirically very sound. So there's a greater propensity for innovation, there's greater knowledge of different cultures, and so that can be financially beneficial to the firm in order to tap different markets. And of course, for Australia, that is particularly relevant as we're in the Asian century, if you like, the 21st century, where trading with Asia is going to be more and more important for Australia, especially as the resource boom inevitably peters out. So those factors are extremely important. And here I'm just looking at the economics of this, by the way, not the social or philosophical arguments of diversity. But on the other side, and this is something that's rarely mentioned, and I think this is something that firms probably have to manage if they are going to embrace diversity, and that there are studies that show in firms where there are workers from various different backgrounds that the channels of communication amongst workers are much weaker, and those informal channels of communication that tend to occur through within homogenous groups are weaker. And so that can create problems for the diffusion of knowledge within an organisation. And that is one factor. The other factor that some researchers have found is that because people tend to like to hang out, if you like, with people in their own culture, and that's just a fact, I suppose, whether you like it or not, that's just what occurs in life, that it might be less appealing to work for a firm if it's not seen as fun, because everyone is kind of withdrawn into their own little groupings and so forth. And so there are these two factors, and basically studies around the world. I don't think there's been a rigorous empirical study in Australia, but in the US and in Europe there have been, and basically they come down on either side. So there's no kind of a clear-cut conclusion, but of course I would say for Australia that the benefits of embracing the cultural diversity are probably heightened because of our position in Asia. So theoretically I would think that it would be even more important here.
Can I come to you on this, Lisa, because I know that Diversity Council obviously does do some research on some of these questions. Is the research as ambivalent as what Adam suggesting?
No, I mean, we just had the Senator get up here and tell us how diverse Australia is. I mean, we can pretend we're in a homogenous country or in a homogenous workplace, but people are diverse. I mean, that's just there. By saying that diversity can create conflict or diversity can create innovation doesn't make us more or less diverse. We just are. The benefit of this tool is that we can use it to our best ability so that we can maximise the positive from the diversity, because we are diverse. We can't change that, and I don't think anyone here would like to change that.
Can I turn to you, Keno? Have you looked at some of the evidence working in PwC? I mean, what's kind of the situation from your perspective when it comes to the evidence base on this?
It's a very important part of any kind of activity on diversity, which is to get to the bottom of the facts and the data. And the facts and the data can be difficult to access because of privacy laws, and so it does require some element of, I guess, voluntary information being provided. And so that's something we're actually in the process of doing at the moment, because we have theories, we have our thinking about what is happening, but where to find the evidence to support that.
Well, I'll come back to you, Adam.
Look, I'm not for a second doubting the benefit of this tool. I wasn't trying to imply that. I'm just kind of sounding a cautionary note. That's all. That there's a difference, I think, between kind of advocating diversity on the one hand with with quotas and so forth, and promoting anti-racism causes and things like that, which I think is a very different thing. And I think those are very valuable, and I think it is very important to make people feel welcome in the workplace and to treat people fairly. But I think that is a different thing from actively setting quotas and so forth. I think that might not be so wise in some cases.
Well, Adam, can I just take you up on the point that you touched on, namely the Asian century of Australia positioning itself, because so much of our conversation about cultural diversity has been linked to the idea of Australia prospering in a region that is currently experiencing very significant economic growth and development. What strategies do you think then are most suitable for Australia to pursue if it is going to get the most out of the so-called Asian century, if not deliberate conscious efforts in the area of diversity and workplace culture?
Well, I think it's especially important for Australian industries to have people on the ground in Asia that can report back on trends and so forth, and the nature of those markets. So I think it's equally important to have diversity in the firm kind of overseas, if you like, as well as domestically. It's not just the rise of Asia. Well, it is the rise of Asia, of course, but it's the growth of services in those countries and their demand for services, which I think makes it even more important, because Australian service industries are really going to have to rise to the occasion. I think we've been insulated to some extent by very high commodity prices, which I think has made the country lazy a little bit in a policy sense, and also in a service export sense, because we just simply haven't had to do that. But I think over the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to have to rely more on our service exports and less on our mineral and also agricultural exports. And so, look, I'm kind of ideologically opposed to subsidies, but if the government can help in an efficient way for Australian firms to harness the benefits of greater diversity, I think this is a good example. I think there was a figure mentioned of 1.7 million. That was the total budget, and this came out of that. So look, if this is a fairly cheap way, if you like, for Australian private sector firms to evaluate their ranking on a diversity measure, and I think that's a very good thing, rather than foisting a whole new raft of regulation on Australian private businesses and kind of forcing them to produce reports and so forth. That is very expensive.
Well, Adam, you get value for money from the Australian Human
That's right.
Let me remind you. Take that back to the editorial team at the Oz. Can I turn to you? Adam did mention service industries. PwC is, of course, a financial services firm. Can I get your thoughts on some of what Adam was talking about?
Yes, so I actually think that one of the most important aspects of diversity and inclusion is communication. And communication begins from what are the driving reasons for diversity and inclusion that are being currently put forward. And clearly the Asian century and the business driver is a very valid and cogent reason. But you could have the world's greatest strategy to move into Asia, but if you don't actually pay attention to what is right and what is the sense of civic duty in what you do, then you'll be missing something. That in on the basis of decision. A lot of communication is needed is around so-called targets. And what I mean by that is that you need to start, I think, with context at the top, which is to say that diverse thinking, when included, brings better outcomes. So in the context of diversity, the question then is that if we don't have leadership levels that are representative of the community, will time alone fix the situation? And I think the broad thinking there is that time alone won't fix it, because while time waits for no person, time will apparently wait for diversity. So, that being the case, some kind of signpost is needed to determine or to measure how well you are progressing on the journey to increasing the sense of diversity. So targets is not about a quota. It's not about positive discrimination. What it's about is a signpost of intervention around how quickly or how well you have moved towards achieving equal opportunity for all people from any cultural background in your organisation.
You mentioned, Ken, the ethical dimension of making the case for diversity. Adam Smith, of course, said that you don't owe your bread to the benevolence of the baker or your meat to the benevolence of the butcher. Lisa, can I come to you on this? How do you build the case from DCA's perspective as to why businesses should think about diversity? Does the ethical side of things count, or do you try and frame it in terms of an economic argument?
I think the ethical side of it always counts. I mean, we're hopefully moral human beings. However, I don't think anything's ever been proved in the boardroom purely on that basis, and so we need to make the business case. And the research suggests that DCA has conducted anyway, that diversity does deliver benefits. So we recently released a report called Capitalising on Culture, and it was specifically about breaking through the bamboo ceiling. It was looking at Asian capability, because we hear our leaders talk all the time about the Asian century and how important it is to the prosperity of Australia. And the interesting thing about our project is it's one of the projects, and I have one of our researchers here in the room. It garnered probably the most attention of virtually any of the DCA projects that we've ever done, because people were so shocked that you can have a country and a workforce that's close to 10% of people who identify as having Asian capability, and yet have executives in Australia, less than 1.8%, who identify as having an Asian capability, and boardrooms everywhere saying we need to tap into our Asian capability, and this is the Asian century. I think it's just drawing the dots. We have the mass, the critical mass there in our schools, in our universities. We don't have them breaking through to the senior decision-making or the key decision-making roles. It makes sense that if we're moving in the Asian century, we tap into those parts of our workforce which have that capability, and they're already there. So it's not about going out and finding it. It's about acknowledging it and maybe using a tool like this to work out how to get there.
We'll come to the audience in a moment for questions, but before I do, I might turn to you, Adam, for one final question. Lisa there talked about leadership not coming through necessarily through the ranks when we're talking about culturally diverse professionals. Do you think it's just a matter of time, perhaps, before we do see people coming through the ranks? Yeah, it's a time issue.
I think it probably is, and I think your Adam Smith quote was actually very apt. I mean, that's what
you would say that.
But I mean, it's a reminder that businesses are ultimately, they ultimately seek profit, and so to the extent that they are harming themselves by not embracing diversity, they will inevitably, eventually, fill the senior management ranks with you know, in this case anyway, with people with more Asian capability. I think that that's just going to happen. But I mean, it's going to be very slow. And this is not just Australia. I mean, you're going to find a huge inertia in all countries. I mean, there's always massive cultural inertia. I mean, you can make all these arguments about, you know, about the federal parliament, about the state parliament, about so, you know, and the arguments are equally valid. I just want to just add one thing, maybe finally, that I really caution. You know, there's this habit of comparing the proportions in companies with the proportions in the wider society, and to the extent that they deviate, then we just assume that there's racism or there's discrimination. I mean, those discrepancies are also a function of people's choices, and not necessarily discrimination. I think it's important to remember that. So, for instance, all the Chinese restaurants, or the French restaurants, the Italian restaurants are going to be filled with people from those backgrounds, and so logically, one for one, automatically, to the extent that that is true, that means that the proportions in other businesses of those people are less. And so I'm just, you know, that's just a very basic example, if you like, of the fact that some cultures choose to go into some industries and not others, and so therefore you get discrepancies.
Well, I suspect we might be turning to this point very shortly, but let me open it up to the floor for questions. Here's your chance to put some questions to the panel. What do you reckon? And we have a roving microphone, so just put your hand up, and Stephanie will come to you with a microphone. We have a question at the front from Tim Wilson.
Sorry, I didn't want to hog the microphone into the first up, but since nobody else will put their hand up. Isn't it really just as much about attitude and approach in terms of acceptance of diversity? Because, of course, diversity doesn't just include issues around cultural backgrounds, it includes lots of different aspects around the way that treated in the workplace, the way gay and lesbian people are, etc. And so, in an age and in an environment, I guess, say, of robust individualism, is it a cultural approach which recognises and respects the fact that people have individual identity an important part in actually getting the most out of your workforce? Adam and everyone else.
Well, Adam, you want to take it off? Well, I think that's right. I mean, Tim is kind of suggesting there, perhaps, that there's no need for kind of arbitrary quotas and so forth in this field, and that it's really an attitudinal change which will occur inevitably. You know, partly because of social values, as people realise the wrongness perhaps of existing ways, but also because of the economic case of the need to harness profits available in Asia, in this case anyway. So that's what I'd say.
Lisa,
I wish if only that were true, but I do think we need to clarify the difference between quotas and targets, just so that we're clear. Quotas are mandated, they're imposed by government, there's usually punitive measures for not reaching them. Targets are something completely different. If you want to achieve anything in business, or in your personal life, you set a goal, you set a target. It's about quantifying and aiming for where you want to be. And I really commend PwC for being the first Australian organisation to set a target for people with Asian capability in partnership. I think it shows where they're heading and what's important to them, but it's not a quota. So I think we need to be very clear about distinguishing that, and I lost the rest of the train of my thought.
Can I come to you, Ken, because PwC does have a target for Asian partners in its firm. Can you talk us through some of the thinking behind that, and perhaps some of the debate that led up to that decision being taken?
Yes. So the projections for our Asia practice have been that 20% of the firm's revenue will be sourced from Asia in 2016. So if you think about 20% of an Australian firm with 500 partners, that's 100 partners who will be servicing this revenue. So that would be 20% of our partners. So we have come to a view that some proportion of those partners serving the Asian business might be well served having an Asian cultural background. So we haven't said 20%, we've said 5%. So 15% we are actually projecting to be from other cultural backgrounds to service that revenue. And we've set that target as a signpost because will time get us there? There is a prospect that the Asian century could pass us. And let me give you an example in business context. And this was the most poignant part of the research which the DCA has just released. And that is that, and as Tim was saying, it affects people from any cultural background, and diversity has many dimensions. But irrespective of the dimension that you have, if you feel that there is a ceiling or something limiting your progress in your organisation, what you'll stop doing are the things that aren't measured, and these are called discretionary things. Do you go and write the paper that you would write and have published? Do you go and form more networks? Do you actually spend your weekends with clients, helping them because they are mainly expats from another country who want to be entertained over the weekend? Do you do these things? These things aren't measured because they are the so-called discretionary things. And if we realise the extent to which, if people feel that they are limited in some way, they say, why bother? That loss of a discretionary effort that people would otherwise be doing is something which I think is really unnoticed. So if we haven't actually noticed that, and I think it's quite a significant contribution, then I am actually wondering if we will not fully capture the opportunities of the Asian century.
Let's take another question we have from the front.
Hi, look, I've got a couple of questions, but I'll try to be very brief. First of all, I'm interested in this notion of quotas, etc., because one of the things that we're challenged with continually in our work, which is within New South Wales Police, is that balance between really reflecting the community and really utilising diversity of thought and recruiting for that diversity of thought and applying that to all levels. How has, in PwC, for example, how has the recruitment, the real commitment to diversity around that context, how has that shifted the way PwC works as an organisation? Because the risk of a tool like this, and it's a very respectful risk, is that people will do the tool, assess themselves, tick a box, and go, we're fine. And the real issue is about transformational leadership. It's about how do we transform the way we do business as a result of the diversity of thought, the diversity of approaches, and that really leads to the Noah's Ark, which is really where a lot of our organisations are at.
Right. So I quickly say that this is very much a matter of mindset, and there are parallels I draw between diversity and market disruption, because of these challenging things which actually require you to rethink your base assumptions about whatever it is that you do and how you do it. So I think that's quite important. And there's a saying that Albert Einstein had, which was, of course, if you try to select a goldfish to climb a tree, you're always going to get underperformance. So the question then is do you actually select people on criteria which actually plays to their strengths, and more importantly, plays to the actual intended, stated purpose for which you are actually recruiting someone, or do you have a standard lens saying that every person we hire at this level in this organisation will fit these criteria? And for so long as we have that instead of something which is more broader based in its thinking, we're not going to get to where we want to be. So the challenge is that, and you actually mentioned a very important point, is that one of the responses to something challenging is to undertake a process of self-assessment. So many people will say, I am a very creative person, I'm a very broad thinker, I'm very diverse, minded, therefore diversity is for the bloke in the office down the corridor from me. But in actual fact, every person has a personal responsibility to understand that diversity and inclusion is not about segmenting or separating anybody. What it's about is actually understanding how each person you meet identifies themselves, then to take an interest in them, to understand them, and then, more importantly, to understand what their point of view might be, and then to include it. And that way, diverse thinking, when included, brings better outcomes.
Mm. Lisa, can I just ask you, in terms of self-assessment, how much of an issue is this when we're talking about diversity in companies? Do you have a situation where organisations may overestimate how diverse and how progressive they are?
I think that that's always a risk, the tick box. It's a risk with any type of tool that people will use, but I don't think that's a reason not to encourage people to actively use tools so that they can improve their capability in diversity. I think that this tool in particular makes it very hard to do the tick box. I think it's very thorough. I think if you go through it and answer the questions, it's not a little bit like ticking, I have so many women at this level of management. It's really more about reflecting on the way you do business, the way your leadership is conducted. So I think if it's done properly, that tick box thing is less of a risk. But the important thing in here is that the organisation's got a commitment to seeing this as an outcome, and that the leadership of the organisation is committed. Now, I could talk a lot about the way we define leadership in Australia and how it's stereotyped and how those stereotypes contribute to us, perpetuating dominant culture. But in many ways, if you're allowed to take this tool and conduct it in an honest way with a genuine intention, because there is a good business reason to do it, then I think that that's a really good start.
We have a question up the back here, and then we'll go to you after that.
I was thinking about redressing the imbalance by joining a Chinese restaurant, but I realised quite quickly that I might not know what the owners really want, and the owners might not really know what they want from me. So my question really is about actual formal training in this area, and for PwC, exactly what you've done in terms of taking it to the next level after the sort of identification of these issues. What are your training programs for individuals within the corporation to learn about how they can change and become more diverse, more accepting of diversity?
Right. So this is a very, very important question, so thank you for asking it. So one of the most important things that we have decided upon is that diversity is not an add-on, and diversity is actually core to our strategy. And so when I thought about all of the milestone programs we have in PwC, so we have programs for new managers, new directors, even new partners, and for high-performing individuals in the organisation. And within all of those milestone courses, we are going to embed diversity segments in there, which will cover a little bit of unconscious bias, will cover a little bit of understanding diverse thinking and inclusion, particularly the significance of inclusion in that context. Then we're going to look at the kinds of things that have been absent for some people in the organisation when it comes to sponsorship, and the extent to which we can broaden the access of people coming through in their careers to leaders in the organisation. And then on particular issues, and I have some particular tips or hints that I would give to people with an Asian cultural background, because I can see their behaviours and I can see how they may not be fully working for them, to help them. And so there's some direct mentoring which we can do. So there's a variety. There's no one silver bullet which will fix everything. It's a combination of things and tools which we will use to get to where we want to be.
I think we have two questions coming up, but if you have a question, now's the time to put up your hand because we'll be wrapping things up very shortly. Over to the back there.
Hi, Simon Darcy, UTS Business School. I'd like to commend PwC on taking the initiative in this area. And just a comment really around reflective organisations. Until organisations actually reflect on who they are and who constitutes an organisation, they don't even understand how they can either be socially inclusive or, more importantly, socially exclusive. So certainly within higher education environments, we have very diverse constituents coming from all over the world now, and as an organisation we need to be aware of that diversity and how to be inclusive of it and how to engage that inclusivity within our various power structures. Many organisations that feel threatened by tools and quotas or targets really should be reflecting on how they exclude people rather than include them within their organisations. So I'd be very interested to hear why some members of the panel find these issues so threatening rather than opportunities to embrace change.
Anyone on the panel want to respond to that? If not, we'll turn to the question.
I might take that as a comment.
Because I'm aware of time, but if you do have a question, please make sure you have your hand up because we're coming very close to the end of our time now.
Hi, I'm Tamerlane Beasley from Beasley Intercultural. I'd like to congratulate the Human Rights Commission on this tool. I think it's a really important tool. I think one of the things that's often forgotten in this piece is that you need awareness first before you can actually build desire and knowledge and capability. And I think one of the challenges in this space is often people think there's a silver bullet. And it's not necessarily just unconscious bias training or a tool or a measurement or a target, but it's all of these things. And I think we need to address structural issues. But I just wanted to challenge one of the points about diversity and performance, is that we know it is true that diversity can actually lead to lower performance if it's not if inclusion is not a part of diversity. And I think when you said discrepancy is a result of people's choices, I think that's assuming that people are always making informed choices and that they always have the awareness piece and the capability covered off on. So I think it's really important to recognise too that Australia, in terms of diversity, when you said the off-sample, Australia, and particularly New South Wales, is one of the most culturally diverse places on the planet and one of the most effective and socially cohesive. So I think we're a good example of productive diversity, and I think we need to learn how to leverage this. So just to recognise that it's more than just one piece, but this is a very important piece. So sorry, a bit of a comment, not really a question, but thank you.
Adam, do you want to offer a quick response to that question about, that comment about choice?
Yeah, you look at, well, and I think it's true. I think that people's decisions are a function of lots of different things, and I certainly wasn't trying to imply that that it was all choice that explained the differences in organisations and the underrepresentation of various sectors of the community at very senior levels. I mean, of course, there's a subtle and implied discrimination. I just always hesitate before mandating laws and so forth to change it. I'm just kind of naturally cynical of such moves, but I'm not for a second suggesting that they don't exist.
We have time for one more question.
Excuse me, I believe for relationships in which coach. I'm interested from a point of view that I understand the need for what you have mentioned in terms of inclusiveness and the use of the tools and so on and so forth. I get the feeling that we're creating, there's no doubts about the talent of the individual coming from these organisations. Undoubtedly, they're very, very highly educated, and these guys coming through are pretty much superstars in terms of people coming into the top four accounting firms and whatnot, financial services organisations. I guess the thing that I'm challenged with at this present moment is, what are we doing in terms of equipping people from culturally diverse origins in terms of encouraging them to step up into leadership, more from an earlier stage in terms of education, in terms of families, in terms of, this for an Asian background. Particularly, the thing is that I know that we're talking about centuries of thinking that doesn't encourage individuals from Asian families to actually consider stepping up into leadership. So there's some real inhibitors that's already there that will be much harder to break unless we actually do something different.
Well, why don't we turn to each of the panelists to offer a concluding thought on this note, namely about how you can nurture leadership and enable opportunity. And we'll start with you, Ken.
So this is a very important question, and it actually addresses a number of the questions and the themes coming through. And that is that if you have not been invited to attend exclusive leadership courses during your career, you will form the view that you're not going to be selected for a leadership position. And some cultural backgrounds, disappointment is a very difficult thing to deal with, particularly if you are from first-generation family and your parents have sacrificed a lot. It means a lot to try to put your hat in the ring for something, which is actually against the grain, because self-promotion is not a desirable attribute. But if you actually do that and fail, that is actually most undesirable. So to form the view, and I've heard this, that Asians don't seek leadership roles, and by the way, they don't have the skills for them. You can see that in a number of different contexts. So you could see on its face value that that is the case. And so it's a question of their choice, or you could look behind that to understand what has driven that. What's actually a very important aspect that I have looked into is that when I speak to people with Asian cultural background about what's happened over the course of their career, once you start to delve a bit more deeply into some of the experiences they've had, the emotion that comes out is consistently one of anger. So I'll just finish it on that point.
Well, why don't we turn to Adam before we go to you? Lisa, Adam, how do you nurture leadership and opportunity? Presumably not through anger.
Well, I mean, to be contrarian again, I wouldn't kind of want to actively nurture it too much, because I just want to point out that throughout Australian history, you find successive waves of immigrants have actually been more successful in many ways than the people that were already here. And I think that first it was the Irish and the Scottish people, and then later the Lebanese community, and since then the Asian community as well. So I think that there's a natural drive amongst new Australians to achieve, and so that's the first point. Second point I would make is we are often viewing success in this very, if you like, European-centric view of the world, that it's about being a CEO and being on a board. I mean, well, it's a very Western way of looking at success, and so just consider whether that is necessarily the definitive measure.
Lisa, leadership and opportunity?
Yeah, I do agree in terms of us needing to broaden our definition of what success is, but I suppose that's something that you can only do as an individual, then it becomes very complex in terms of how you define personal success. But getting back to the point you raised, I think that it's very similar to the arguments that are always being made in the gender space, that women don't apply for promotions, that women don't put their hand up. There's this focus on fixing the individual who is inherently the problem in the system. What I'm saying is if you really want to provide the benefits of diversity, we actually don't want to change the diverse attributes of people, because then we're just making people assimilate and creating a homogenous society. But actually what we want to do is challenge the leadership and the structure of organisations to become more inclusive. And so rather than focusing on individuals as the problem, then of course there's individual personal differences between, ambition. But our research actually has found that there's similar levels of ambition between, people who are in the dominant group and people who are in the non-dominant group, and what makes the difference is very complex. But I do believe that we need to focus on the way institutions are run, what constitutes leadership, the sorts of things we think are important, not just for cultural diversity, but for all diverse groups.
Well, on that note, I think we might wrap things up, but thank you to our panellists for a diverse and enriching conversation as befitting a panel discussion for the launch of a cultural diversity tool. I think we had a good range of perspectives, and hopefully you were challenged along the way as well. But please join me in thanking our panellists. Ken Wu, Lisa Renese, and Adam Crichton. And in wrapping up, I also want to reiterate thanks again to PwC for hosting us this evening. In particular, thanks to Luke Sayers and to Ken Wu for their support of this initiative. And thanks again to DCA and Vic Health. And before we wrap up, and before I invite you to join us for drinks and refreshments, I also want to mention a number of people at the Human Rights Commission who've worked really hard on the development of this tool. Rivka Nassim, been working on this for quite some time now. Katie Ellenson has been organising this event along with others at PwC, and also thanks to the other crew from the Australian Human Rights Commission, including our communications team who are here today and who've helped in organising it. But thank you for coming, and don't forget, log into culturaldiversity.humanrights.gov.au and have a look at the tool, and please let us know how you find it. Thank you. Thanks, Adam.